Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Bonehead Collective, where today I want to talk a little bit about Borderlands 4. So if you watched my Q&A session I did a few years back, or if you watched my most recent interview I did with Raider Deck, you might know that I'm a little bit of a fan of the Borderlands series, and though Borderlands 3 left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, I am hesitantly optimistic for Borderlands 4. So back on the 20th of August of 2024, this year, Gearbox showed the world the reveal trailer for Borderlands 4, which I wasn't expecting personally. I know some people might say they heard rumours or, it was leaked that it was going to be there, but personally I hadn't heard anything about Borderlands 4 being talked about, let alone the opening reveal of Gamescom. And not long after the reveal, Gearbox held a panel at PAX West, I want to say, where they were meant to talk a little bit more about Borderlands 4, and it was essentially a nothing burger, but they did say that when it comes to the 4 new Vault Hunters we're getting, they're switching things up a bit. Now, what that means is anyone's guess. It could mean that the typical archetypes we've had over the last, 3 major entries of, a soldier, a sniper, a siren, and then, a tank kind of character, might be switched up. But I'm not smart enough to think of how that could switch up. But there is one thing I can say with almost 100% certainty, and that is with Borderlands 4, we will have a 4th playable Siren. We had Lilith in Borderlands 1, Maya in Borderlands 2, Amara in Borderlands 3. Borderlands 4 will give us our 4th playable Siren. The only thing I can't say for sure is what their power will be or who they will be, but if you've watched this kind of video I've put out before, you know that's never stopped me, and for once I actually did enough research to feel like I have come up with something that is possible and actually based in the world of Borderlands 4, while also using some real world logic to back something up. So let's talk about the potential name of our new Siren first, and where we need to look for this is back in the pre-sequel. There is a challenge called Digging Up the Past, I believe that's what it's called, you can fact check me, I'll fact check myself. But in this challenge, you find 4 echo recordings belonging to a woman called Emily Swan. And these echo recordings are basically just her documenting her time working for Dole as a cleaner, and that she has a young daughter called Emily who is very ill. Over the course of these echo recordings, Annie mentions that Emily is getting worse and worse, and then one night while she was cleaning, she sees this alien figure off in the distance, and it just watches her. Turns out this is the Watcher, the Guardian who informed the Vault Hunters of an incoming war, like the war that everyone assumed Borderlands 3 would be about, but we can now probably safely assume that it's going to be the entire premise of Borderlands 4 instead. In the final echo recording, Annie mentions that Emily is basically at death's door, but the Guardian approached Annie and gave her the message, "She will live, leave this moon." This understandably confuses Annie, but the next morning when she goes to visit Emily, Nurse Nina informs Annie that during the night there was this blinding purple flash that filled her entire medbay, and when she went to investigate, Emily's there just well and healthy again, lucid and awake. And then through seeing this, it can be assumed that Annie realised the Watcher was speaking the truth and followed up on the second bit of advice he gave her, which was to leave this moon, to get off of Elpis and head down to Pandora. Now, I'm not the first person to point out that it's a bit strange that the Watcher helped Emily Swan of all people in the 6 galaxies. And I'm definitely not the first person to follow that thought up by thinking that Emily Swan must be of importance in this upcoming war. As in the Watcher's time, he must have seen hundreds, if not thousands, of men, women and children die of all different kinds of causes and ailments, but for some reason chose Emily Swan to save. But I think the answer to this is also in the pre-sequel. Athena was telling the events of the pre-sequel story to Lilith and the Crimson Raiders before she was meant to be executed. And when Lilith had finally heard enough, she still ordered Athena dead anyway, but the Watcher came in and stopped it. So during the events of the pre-sequel, there are at least 2 accounts of the Watcher directly preventing the death of an individual. The Watcher's reasoning for sparing Athena is that the Crimson Raiders are going to need all the help they can get, all of the Vault Hunters they can get their hands on in this upcoming war. So why else would the Watcher save Emily Swan if she was not destined to become a Vault Hunter? But not just a Vault Hunter, a Siren Vault Hunter. And admittedly, this could be way off the mark. Gearbox may or may not have forgotten the fact that they ever included this interaction between Annie, Emily, and the Watcher. They could have completely forgotten that they may have set this up or planted some seeds for this to come back in a future title. The reality of the matter is Gearbox have already chosen who their playable Siren is going to be. They've already settled on her name, her design, and her powers. But again, that's never stopped me before. And while I mention powers, let's talk about what this 4th Siren's powers is potentially going to be. So I had already scripted a video called The Second Siren Theory, which was a video that discusses exactly what we're talking about right now, but I'm not actually using a script here. This is just me rambling because I felt like that script was a little bit over dramatic and it just didn't fit what I was trying to get across, as is the case with a lot of scripted videos I do, turns out. So in this theory, the Second Siren Theory, I mentioned the whole Annie Swan thing and how I believe that's who our 4th playable Siren could be. But the reason I called it the Second Siren Theory is because it revolved heavily around Commandant Steel. Commandant Steel was the second Siren introduced, not just in Borderlands 1, but just across the entire franchise as a whole. But like most antagonists in the Borderlands series, instead of direct confrontation multiple times, Commandant Steel was relegated 99% of the time to echo calls. Every time the Vault Hunter did something that progressed the story, the chances are Commandant Steel would then radio in and berate and lambast you for your actions. And it's only when you reach the entrance to the vault that you see Commandant Steel in the flesh. She's standing up on the podium with the vault key and she pushes it in place to open the vault and then turns around to gloat and mock the Vault Hunters for being too slow. They're under arrest, to get them, kill them, blah blah blah. But in this moment where she's lowered her guard thinking she has won, she gets impaled by this eldritch hentai monster called the Destroyer. She's then eaten, and we don't actually see anything of her again until the Claptrap DLC, where she's turned into Steel Trap, I think her name was. The biggest letdown about this situation was we never actually got to see what Commandant Steel's siren powers were. We know she is a siren because she has the tattoos and she's able to manipulate the Vault Key in the ways that normal humans cannot. But we have never seen or heard any kind of explanation, hint, clue, anything about what Commandant Steele's powers could be. So when I was scripting the video, I decided to try and do a little bit of research to see if I can find any small trace of information, and I couldn't. So I decided to go a different direction. I looked a little bit into Commandant Steele's personal history. I looked into the rank of Commandant itself, and that's where I began to piece together my own headcanon for what Commandant Steele's power could be. So when it comes to the rank of Commandant, it's not what you'd expect. It's not like a field commander or a major or a general. A Commandant is typically an individual who is in charge of military training academies or military schools. Commandants are the people who train soldiers, who teach them tactics, strategies, field planning, how to lead, how to act and execute orders. They are someone with a lot of experience in the field and are obviously very highly intelligent if they are in charge of an entire academy. So now you're probably wondering, well, why have they taken someone who is essentially a glorified headmaster or principal of an academy and sent them on the hunt for a vault? And again, that feels fairly easy to answer. Atlas in the lore were the first to open a vault back on Promethea, so they were already kind of intimately aware of how vaults worked. And having that initial leg up on vaults and how they function, they may have already been aware of the fact that sirens are also linked to the vaults and could potentially help in opening the vaults faster, or at the very least help locate it easier. So with the massive coincidence that they just happen to have a siren as a high-ranking official in their military, they're obviously going to send Commandant Steel out there. And they also won't have to worry about her being able to handle herself in the field, because again, for her position, she would need a lot of experience under her belt. And this was the point in reading this where I started thinking about more specifics on what her powers could have been. And again, none of this is official, none of this has ever been mentioned anywhere, this is purely headcanon, this is just something I've made up while researching and scripting a different video. But I don't think there would be a power better for someone like Commandant Steel, an intelligent individual who trains and teaches soldiers in tactics and strategy, how to maneuver around the battlefield, how to effectively flank your enemy or take an objective. A power that would let her have that minute surgical level of detail at her fingertips is a power I called Phase Gate. Essentially, Phase Gate would allow Commandant Steel to place 2 portals anywhere in the environment within a given range, one directly at her feet and another where she wants to be. And instead of trying to communicate to her soldiers where she wants them to be, she can use Phase Gate to just put her men where she needs them, literally directly controlling the battlefield. So what does that have to do with Emily Swan? What does that have to do with the 4th Siren? Well, if you think about it, Commandant Steel died before we got to see her powers, and it's a known fact that when a siren dies, someone else in the universe, either at random or through some kind of succession ceremony, a new siren receives their powers. Not always necessarily from birth, it could always be at a young age, or in the case of Patricia Tannis, quite late in her life. I believe Commandant Steel died, and Emily Swan inherited her siren powers. The Watcher, who is a Guardian, who are made by the Iridians, who also have a link to the Sirens, would be aware of Emily Swan becoming a Siren, learning that she is unwell, and directly stepping in to heal her to make sure she is ready in time for this giant coming war. Which is also why he has her sent to Pandora, which is by all accounts a hellscape, but it would make Emily a strong warrior. Being on Pandora, basically fighting for your life every day, would give Emily that experience, that knowledge, that drive, and that strength to be able to go toe to toe with the Vault Hunters in this war. Each Siren's power is unique. Phase Walk, Phase Grasp, Phase Leech, Phase Trance, Phase Shift, Phase Gate, really, if we're gonna do this, which I'm doing it, so 6 different powers belonging to 6 different Sirens that are all unique. And being able to play with that power, with Commandant Steele's lost power, it would be a nice way to tie it back to Borderlands 1. That way we would have seen all 6 Sirens and all 6 powers. Again, not including like the successors like Ava or Tannis. You could be playing with an entire team of your friends and you find yourselves against a horde of bandits and psychos and you need to flank them so you can maneuver your team around the battlefield. You've got a friend who's about to go down or is in fight for your life mode, but you're not going to get to them in time, so you can drop a portal on top of them to bring them back to you for easy healing. Sirens are tied to elemental abilities as well, so you could have skills in the skill trees that assign those portals certain elemental affinities, meaning that once you walk through it, you gain an increase in damage while using that element, or the reverse, it could increase your defense against those elements. If you want to bring an enemy closer to you without breaking cover, you can drop a portal on them and bring them closer to you, so you can single out a more heavy hitting enemy that's going to give you trouble while dealing with additional mob. I feel like even though Phase Gate is such a simple concept of a power, there is still a lot that could be done with Phase Gate. It has offensive and defensive capabilities, as well as many potential utilities in things like world traversal or discovering secret areas or sequence breaking. You combine this power that used to belong to Commandant Steel with Emily Swan, you get a callback on two fronts. You have Gearbox showing that they remember and care about their own lore by bringing Emily Swan back and confirming why she was important enough to the Watcher to be kept alive, and to finally reveal one of the longest mysteries in the Borderlands franchise of what Commandant Steele's power was. But again, like I said earlier in the video, at this point, with the game releasing next year, it's blatantly obvious that they've already picked their Siren, if we have a Siren. She's already got a name, already got a backstory, already got a power, so the chance of me being wrong on this is like 99.9%, at least on the power front, but I feel like the chance of the Siren actually being Emily Swan is probably closer to maybe like 10 to 15% possible. But that's where I'm gonna leave the video here. I want to know what you guys think. I want to know who you think the potential Siren could be. Ideas for Siren powers or abilities. Different archetypes that may be what the developers were referencing when they said they're switching things up. I'd just like to know what you guys think about the upcoming Borderlands 4 and what you wouldn't like to see. Because I imagine once 2025 hits, we'll start hearing a lot more about the game and we'll start getting character trailers and whatnot. But in the meantime, it's always fun to speculate and it's always fun to read what you guys come up with. So until the next video, bye!